Taxi Driver ending. Travis Bickle dies during the final shootout. The heroic ending where Travis survives, becomes a media sensation, and wins back Betsy's respect is his dying hallucination. During the climactic rescue in Taxi Driver, Travis takes multiple gunshots in a cramped hallway, sustains severe wounds, and mimics shooting himself in the head. The camera then pulls up and away in an overhead shot, a perspective Scorsese described as a God's eye view, suggesting Travis's soul leaving his body. What follows defies logic. The media praises him as a hero, despite the vigilante carnage. Betsy, who previously rejected him completely, suddenly shows interest and admiration. His scars heal remarkably fast. Even Travis's final look in the rearview mirror suggests confusion, as if questioning his own reality. Scorsese and screenwriter Paul Schrader have said the ending was intended literally, though they acknowledge that its tone invites dreamlike readings, and that many viewers see Travis's survival as a fantasy of salvation. The theory recontextualizes the entire final act as Travis getting exactly what he wanted, but only in death, which aligns with the film's themes of delusion and violence as escape. Henry Hill is lying to us throughout Goodfellas. The entire film is filtered through his perspective as he recounts his life to federal agents and later to us directly. But Henry is a compulsive liar, a criminal, and by the film's climax, severely addicted to cocaine. His narration glamorizes violence, downplays consequences, and presents himself as smarter and more important than he likely was. Specific contradictions emerge when cross-referenced with Karen's narration. She describes fear and chaos, while Henry describes excitement and control. The famous Copacabana tracking shot, where Henry smoothly navigates the club's back entrance, receiving respect and admiration, may be Henry's inflated memory of fumbling through a service corridor. The helicopter paranoia sequence shows his unreliable mental state explicitly. Ray Liotta's performance shifts between charming storyteller and defensive justifier. When Henry says the lifestyle was great until it wasn't, he's still selling us on his glory days, minimizing victims, and positioning himself as someone who had no choice. The film's genius is that it never directly confirms or denies Henry's version, leaving viewers to question how much of what they witnessed actually happened the way Henry claims. Shutter Island reality. Teddy Daniels was always a patient at Ashcliff Hospital. The elaborate investigation into a missing patient was role-play therapy designed by Dr. Cawley to break through his delusions. This isn't just about the twist ending, but about the evidence throughout suggesting Andrew Laeddis never stopped being a patient. The storm that traps them on the island occurs with suspicious timing. Guards treat Teddy with unusual deference and fear rather than professional courtesy. His partner Chuck's badge is pinned on incorrectly, like someone unfamiliar with being a marshal. The patients and staff often speak directly to Andrew's real trauma rather than the fictional investigation. Dr. Cawley's seemingly risky decision to allow an armed, paranoid federal marshal to roam freely makes sense only if Teddy has no real authority. During Teddy's interview with patient Bridget Kearns, she appears to mime drinking from an invisible glass of water that then reappears on the table, suggesting a deliberate break in visual continuity tied to Teddy's fractured perception rather than a straightforward mistake. The final line, which would be worse, to live as a monster or to die as a good man, indicates Andrew chooses lobotomy over living with the truth. Scorsese fills the film with continuity errors and impossible details that aren't mistakes, but evidence. The entire movie is the therapy, and we're experiencing Andrew's elaborate conspiracy theory as he constructs it in real time. Cape Fear connection. Sam Bowden in Cape Fear is Travis Bickle 20 years later. This theory connects Scorsese's 1991 remake to his 1976 masterpiece through Robert De Niro's transformation from violent protagonist to violent antagonist. Travis, after his vigilante violence, could have channeled his savior complex into law, becoming a defense attorney who protects people through the system rather than through guns. Sam's specific guilt over bearing evidence to convict Max Cady echoes Travis's willingness to break rules for perceived justice. Both films obsess over protecting a young woman. Both feature protagonists with warped moral codes, and both climax with extreme waterborne violence. Some critics and fans have suggested this connection, noting how De Niro plays both characters as men who believe they're righteous. Scorsese's recurring themes of masculine violence, Catholic guilt, and the cost of protection link the films thematically, even if not literally. The Cape Fear remake positions Sam as someone who learned the wrong lessons from his violent past, becoming complicit in institutional violence rather than street violence. Travis wanted to save Iris. Sam thought he could save society by convicting Katie illegally. Both men face consequences when their violence comes home. The theory transforms Cape Fear from a simple thriller remake into a meditation on whether violent men can ever truly reform or simply redirect their aggression. Jake LaMotta's rage stems from repressed homosexual desires. Raging Bull is saturated with subtext about masculinity, physical intimacy between men, and Jake's inability to process his feelings except through violence. Boxing itself becomes loaded with homoeroticism. Men embrace in the ring, study each other's bodies, and achieve physical intimacy impossible in Jake's outside life. Jake's relationships with women are marked by suspicion, jealousy, and emotional distance, while his relationship with his brother Joey involves intense emotion, physical affection, and devastating betrayal when Jake beats him. The film's most intimate moments occur between Jake and other men, especially during the boxing sequences, shot in slow motion with almost romantic lighting. Jake's paranoia about his wife's faithfulness may be projection of his own unacknowledged desires. His destruction of his body through weight gain and self-punishment suggests deep self-hatred. The scene where Jake insists Joey hit him in the face while calling himself pretty carries implications beyond simple self-destruction. Scorsese deliberately includes moments of Jake gazing at male bodies, fixating on physical perfection, and seeking validation from men rather than women. The final scene, where Jake recites Marlon Brando's speech from On the Waterfront about his brother, underscores that Jake's deepest relationship was always with Joey. The violence becomes Jake's only acceptable way to touch other men, to be touched, and to express feelings he cannot articulate or accept. Jordan Belfort is still conning us in his own movie. The Wolf of Wall Street presents itself as a cautionary tale of excess and consequence. But the theory argues Belfort remains unreliable, minimizing his crimes, exaggerating his charm, and erasing his victims. The film focuses almost entirely on the perpetrators having fun, with victims appearing only briefly and without depth. Real Stratton Oakmont employees have stated the actual office was grimmer, more violent, and less comically excessive than portrayed. Belfort was sentenced to 4 years, but served about 22 months in a minimum security federal prison before reinventing himself as an author and motivational speaker, much as the film depicts. The movie's style mimics Belfort's motivational speaking, fast talking over uncomfortable truths, keeping audiences entertained rather than critical. Scorsese deliberately withholds scenes of victim suffering, mirroring how Belfort himself refused to acknowledge the retirees and working-class people he bankrupted. The FBI agent on the subway, riding home on a mediocre life while Jordan lives large, positions morality as losing and corruption as winning. Even caught, Jordan sells his story and becomes wealthy again. The final scene shows him teaching sales techniques to an eager audience, suggesting his con continues. We're that audience. We watched 3 hours of debauchery entertainment and called it critique. Belfort sold us on his legend, and Scorsese showed us how effectively sociopaths rewrite their own histories. The film is the con. Ace Rothstein and Nicky Santoro are already dead, narrating Casino from the afterlife. The film opens with Ace's car exploding, seemingly killing him, then flashes back through the entire story. Both Ace and Nicky narrate in past tense, reflecting on events with the wisdom of hindsight and the distance of death. The stylistic choice mirrors the structure of film noir, where dead narrators tell their own downfall. Nicky's narration continues even after his brutal death in the cornfield, describing his own murder in detached tones. Ace narrates calmly about losing everything: his wife, his casino, and his life in Las Vegas. The mythic quality of the storytelling, the heightened reality of the costumes and violence, the almost theatrical presentation of events, all suggest a story being recounted from beyond. The ending shows Ace alive, but diminished, returned to betting sports in a sterile, modern casino, possibly representing purgatory or hell for a man who lived for the game. Heaven for Ace would be running a casino. His punishment is being a nobody better. The theory reframes Casino not as a crime chronicle, but as a confessional. Two dead men explaining how greed, ego, and violence destroyed them. They're warning us from the grave, but like all Scorsese protagonists, their warnings come too late to save themselves. By the way, if you're finding this interesting, I create content like this all the time. A subscription would really help out. Rupert Pupkin never actually succeeds. The triumphant ending of The King of Comedy, where Rupert becomes a celebrated talk show host after kidnapping Jerry Langford, is a delusion, mirroring the ambiguous finale of Taxi Driver. The film presents Rupert's increasingly desperate fantasies throughout, showing him imagining conversations with Jerry, envisioning crowd adoration, and rehearsing success in his basement. The final sequence, where Rupert emerges from prison to fame and fortune, follows the same dreamy, detached style as his earlier fantasies. Scorsese deliberately blurs the line between reality and delusion, never confirming whether Rupert's success is real or his final fantasy while serving his sentence. Paul Zimmerman's screenplay and Scorsese's direction invite viewers to question everything after the kidnapping. Would American media actually reward a criminal with celebrity? Would publishers pay handsomely for his autobiography? Would television networks hire someone who held a beloved host hostage? The 80s certainly rewarded criminal notoriety, but the film's presentation suggests otherwise. Rupert's final introduction, hearing his name announced to thunderous applause, echoes his basement rehearsals exactly. He finally gets his fantasy, but Scorsese leaves us uncertain whether it's happening or if Rupert has retreated completely into delusion. Like Travis Bickle, Rupert Pupkin achieves his dream through violence and madness. And like Travis, the question remains whether that dream is real or the last refuge of a broken mind. Colin Sullivan knew he was part of a larger mole network from the beginning. The Departed presents Colin as Costello's sole plant in the Massachusetts State Police. But the theory argues Colin was aware of the full scope of corruption, deliberately playing both sides while knowing he was one among many. Evidence throughout suggests Colin's actions indicate knowledge beyond what Costello tells him. He maneuvers politically within the department with sophistication, suggesting insider understanding. His relationship with Madeline positions him to gather intelligence on the undercover operation through her therapy practice. When Berrigan is revealed as another mole, Colin shows less surprise than expected. The rat symbolism throughout the film extends beyond the obvious Billy and Colin dynamic. Rats appear repeatedly, suggesting infestation, not a single pest. Colin's apartment building, his therapy discussions, even the final scene with the rat on his balcony, all point towards systemic corruption rather than individual betrayal. Captain Ellerby's suspicious behavior and convenient ignorance suggest complicity. Colin's methodical elimination of witnesses and evidence indicates someone operating with a larger plan, not someone improvising to save himself. The film's title refers to the departed, plural, suggesting multiple losses and betrayals. Scorsese adapted the Hong Kong film Infernal Affairs, but emphasized institutional rot over individual corruption. Colin wasn't just Costello's mole. He was part of a network, and his death at Dignam's hands eliminates only one rat in a building full of them. Bill the Butcher possesses supernatural abilities in Gangs of New York. This theory examines whether Bill Cutting is entirely human or represents something demonic, unkillable, and mythologically evil. Bill survives wounds that should kill him. The opening battle sees him stabbed and slashed repeatedly, yet he walks away. His glass eye becomes a ritualistic object, suggesting something beyond human. Priests react to him with genuine fear beyond normal intimidation, crossing themselves and backing away as if confronting evil itself. Bill's knowledge of events he shouldn't know about suggests supernatural awareness. His ability to appear exactly when needed, to know Amsterdam's true identity, and to survive assassination attempts borders on precognition. The film's visual style presents Bill in demonic terms, backlit with hellfire, surrounded by shadow, wielding blades with inhuman skill. His death requires a specific ritual, Amsterdam using his father's knife in an almost exorcism-like confrontation. The historical Bill Poole died after being shot, living nearly 2 weeks with a bullet in his heart, whereas Scorsese's Bill requires symbolic defeat by the son of his enemy, suggesting mythological rules rather than strict historical fact. Bill represents old New York, old hatreds, old violence that refuses to die naturally. The draft riots literally rain artillery fire to finally end him, as if heaven itself needed to intervene. Whether literally supernatural or mythologically presented, Bill the Butcher functions as an immortal embodiment of American nativist violence, requiring extraordinary measures to finally kill. The Aviator is told entirely from Howard Hughes's deteriorating perspective, with visual style reflecting his advancing mental illness. Scorsese made deliberate cinematographic choices that mirror Hughes's psychological state. The film begins in a realistic style, but as Hughes's obsessive-compulsive disorder worsens, the visuals become more stylized, paranoid, and distorted. Color grading shifts throughout match Hughes's mental states. Early sequences use period-appropriate 2-strip Technicolor, transitioning to 3-strip as technology advanced. But these changes also represent Hughes's changing perception of reality. His fear of contamination manifests in how the camera frames germs, dirt, and human contact. Sound design becomes hypersensitive during his episodes, with ambient noise overwhelming dialogue, representing his inability to filter stimuli. The famous peas scene, where Hughes obsessively sorts peas by size, is shot with increasing close-ups and disorienting angles, trapping viewers in his compulsion. Later scenes, particularly his isolation in the screening room, present time as fractured and uncertain, matching his break from reality. When Hughes emerges to defend himself at the Senate hearing, the film's style temporarily stabilizes, suggesting moments of lucidity. Scorsese used Hughes's mental illness as the film's structure itself, making the audience experience paranoia, obsession, and distortion alongside the protagonist. The unreliability isn't just Hughes's narration, but the film's very presentation of events. We never know what actually happened versus what Hughes perceived, making The Aviator a subjective biography where mental illness becomes the cinematographer. The entire film is the temptation, not just the final crucifixion sequence. The Last Temptation of Christ concludes with Jesus and the cross, realizing his domestic life with Mary Magdalene was a hallucination offered by Satan. But the theory argues the entire film, from the beginning, represents an extended fantasy of normalcy and human experience. Scorsese adapted Nikos Kazantzakis' novel, which presents Christ's entire life as wrestling with human desires versus divine purpose. Every scene showing Jesus as uncertain, fearful, or desiring ordinary life could be the temptation itself. The film's realistic, unglamorous portrayal of first-century Judea contrasts sharply with traditional biblical epics, suggesting an alternate reality where Jesus is simply human. His early scenes as a crossmaker, collaborating with Rome, and dating Mary Magdalene present a life he might have lived without accepting divinity. The miracles occur reluctantly, with Jesus often surprised by his own powers, as if they're interrupting a normal existence. His friendship with Judas is portrayed as the relationship of equals, not master and betrayer, suggesting a world where Jesus never claimed to be the Messiah. The crucifixion fantasy merely makes explicit what the entire film implied, that Jesus could have been ordinary man, married with children, dying in bed surrounded by family. Scorsese's controversial masterpiece suggests Christ's sacrifice wasn't just physical suffering, but the rejection of every human experience. And that temptation began long before the cross. The whole film is Satan's offer. What if you were just a person? If you found this worth your time, consider subscribing so you don't miss future content. Thanks for watching.